Welcome back to Breakneck, another edition of our podcast that is focused on the challenges and opportunities coming from AI and technology changes, but from two people who are building companies right now. Ian and I have been product managers in the past. Ian has much more experience with product management. I'm more of a data scientist, but we both have startups we're running, and we want to give a perspective not from the investment perspective or even from the what are the algebra that's being done in the background 10 trillion times a second, but instead how are we going to bring this to market? So I think that's the focus of the podcast. What should we talk about today?
Well, let's talk about. I always think when I think about product, because you position me that way, I think about a holistic version of product, right? Pricing, the four P's, right? Part of that is marketing and how products are consumed. And as it happens, Matt, if I'm remembering correctly, you're in Austin.
I
And
am.
there's something interesting going on this week in Austin, which probably speaks to the way people are talking about agents and AI. So tell us a bit more. What's going on this
Yeah,
week?
no, I spent the weekend at South by Southwest. Huge crowds, very well attended. So Austin is looking very fine in March. Nobody comes in August though, so don't move here if you just came for South Bath expecting this weather all year long. But it was a great weekend, and you know, I I just think it's worth emphasizing this agentic way of thinking about where AI is going to come, which is that we're going to be giving more and more authority and more power to agents to take independent action. Um, is super important, and you really start to see. I mean, someone coming to a conference and coming, I gave it a talk on AI. Someone attending an event like that is probably already in that top percentiles of awareness. But you're seeing it spread more and more, and there's more and more people who are thinking that way. So I was seeing people at big companies, international tech conglomerates. I don't want to name anybody's names, but it's filtering down. And so in terms of the demand, people from finance companies saying, "What's our agentic strategy?"
So are we back in? We've got to go mobile. And what's our mobile strategy?
What's our
What was the
mobile
sort of?
strategy? No, it's like that. And in my talk, I said there was four big transitions that I've seen in my lifetime, not my career. My career is much too short. But the move from kind of like a mainframe to a PC modality, which is you're selling to different people, you're selling very different functionality. It's just a whole new market. The switch to the internet in the 90s, the switch to mobile starting in 2007, 2008, and then this is the fourth big one. And I was a big AI skeptic, honestly, because you see wave after wave, and I've been doing machine learning, but this is real, and it's moving buying power. And I think we have a couple things to chat about distribution, which is probably where we should go next. But I have good examples of people.
Yeah, I'd like to just take a beat on that one for a second. What was the average, if this is the right way to say it, what was the average level of education amongst the people you spoke to? Were you learning from them, or do they even have framing in their own mind? Like, what was the general level of education around what agents are and what AI can do?
I think there's three types of people. One, I would consider myself like an evangelist, like people who are really very excited about agents because we've been trying to take AI to market. We've been trying to take new products to market for a couple years, 3 years, and like we're just feeling so much energy. And you're one of those people. You're evangelistic about it. You're like, oh, I've seen the light. And again, I was skeptical. I'm not. I
Yeah, me
genuinely
too.
I was burned in 2016. I thought we were going to have chatbots were going to become a major way to sell, and we invested quite a bit of effort in 2016 into that, and it kind of just fizzled. And a year or two later, it just wasn't something that was producing sales, and we move on to other stuff. This doesn't feel like that at all. So I'm evangelistic. The second type was people who are practitioners, but who maybe don't think about AI. People who are using AI aggressively in their fields, but have not really thought about agents, but are probably closest to the people who are really knowledgeable about what they're going to be able to do because they're using them in existing business practices. And then the third is people who know agents but are now just kind of like scared and are looking for, and that's probably the 85% of people are in that. Their awareness is there now, at least at this conference. The awareness is there. They must have heard about it, but now they're starting to go back and do the questions that we've talked about on this podcast, which is what about security? Who has access to data? how do we scale this out? How do we release this inside our gigantic megacorp and not just in,
Yeah, I always think conferences are a fantastic place to get, especially if you do the same conference year after year. It's almost like you can chart the trajectory of a technology or an industry in that kind of adoption curve, literally by the questions you get asked. If you set up a little bit of a booth and people come to you, the first year they're like, "Well, what's an agent?" "Oh, it's AI." "Okay." And then the year later, they're more educated, more educated. So it's really informative. Somewhat related to that, you kind of tip the hat to a little bit. Distribution. It's been on my mind a lot this week. We are, so we're bringing this new technology to the marketplace. You don't sell technologies, you sell products, and products are sort of a holistic wrapper around a technology that I kind of alluded to, right? It's got pricing, it's got the actual product itself, it's got positioning. What are you positioning against? You've got individual customers and you've got a whole market, and part of the model is distribution. I'll start maybe with kind of the App Store model, which to me on the surface makes no sense, but that's just on the surface. So I'll give you maybe two examples. There's one called Hippocratic.ai in the medical space. Really interesting one. Go out and look at it. It's kind of been anointed as the kind of the winner in that space. High-end investors that you will all recognize, some hospital networks, and they are basically creating an app store for clinicians to create their own AI agent, which gets sold on. There's a version of that on Salesforce as well. There's other places like agent.ai, and there's a bunch of different app stores for agents. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah,
And perhaps that's because
there's
of
no
the
choke point that's equivalent to iOS or Android that you would be able to facilitate a store. It's not like Agent.ai has any special access to users. I can imagine a hospital chain adopting a single app store as a way to allow agents into their company, but it's a very different thing selling into a small group of people through a single place versus having access to 2 or 3 billion users.
Yeah, it also speaks, maybe my perspective on it speaks to the type of agents we're working on. Our stuff tends to be glue type of situation. Data and systems and a bunch of different things. We grab it together and we add value. App Store model doesn't really work. If you look at Agentforce and the App Exchange as well, Salesforce is kind of the anchor tenant in that architecture, and I can kind of see that making sense. But let's say you have a scenario where you want to get some data out of Salesforce, you also need to contract out a DocuSign and do something in a Google Doc. That App Store marketplace doesn't make sense for me, but maybe
Yeah,
I'm missing it.
I mean, maybe who knows, but I don't particularly put much weight in the idea that you can build an app store, and even OpenAI built their GPT store, and I haven't heard a single thing about that being relevant in months. One thing that is, I think, based on my experience this weekend, especially, hearing a lot more about MCP, which is the Model Context Protocol that Anthropic proposed. And I read the proposal a few months ago, a couple months ago when it came out, and I was like, okay, this is probably something that should exist, but this kind of like an introduction to it. It looked really kind of.
Yeah, lay it out for the folks who haven't
So the
come
idea, oh,
across
so
it.
the idea is, let's say that you want to adopt various agents into your company. You're going to have all these data stores within your company, and instead of having an agent provision access to each of these things individually, basically they'll all go into an MCP server, and then that unified look at your data will um, provision access to that agent who can then interact with it. And they honestly, I need to go learn more about like the particular privacy and distribution policies in it because it does feel like something that's relevant. I talked to founders who started companies and are getting them accepted into accelerators like in the last few days that are building open source MCP. And one of the companies that I watch really well that does agents that's doing a lot of revenue, they just said, hey, we're announcing our MCP integration. So I think you're starting to see open protocols. MCP is an open protocol, and the way that the founder I talked to this weekend, who just got getting funded for this, like in the last week, he established his C corp in Delaware. Was it's like HTTP. It's we're coming up with a open model for distributing and navigating this space So that was something that I think is moving along. Otherwise, I would be, Microsoft, Salesforce, those guys are
Yeah,
going to
because
have.
I think there's if there's a marketplace, if there's an app store, then there's what I would call sort of a platform agent model. And so let's take Workday or Salesforce, and you're building an agent ostensibly on top of that platform. But in reality, there's no problem with you connecting over, as the example of DocuSign or Google Docs. You can do all of that. But what the platform agent model does do is lend its credibility. You got your security stuff, you got some trust stuff. So in that sense, there's a bunch of value. In terms of moving data where it needs to get to and ultimate utility out of the product, I don't think it does, but it does have more value than that kind of app store.
One other thing I saw worked really well this weekend. My buddy is starting essentially a agentic um, services company is the best way I would describe it. It's like, hey, there's all these technologies, they're changing. We have our own internal software that we're building, but basically we come in, what agent are you trying to build? And we'll own that for you and adopt the right technologies and move it in. And I think that's going to be a very powerful mode. And going back to mobile, we saw a lot of these 400 person services company popping up that do mobile or this type. And, you know, um, that's a very, like if you're building the company, that could be a very good way to go make a couple $100 million in the next 5, 6 years is put together a 500 person development company and app development and agent development. And I like the model, but then I watched him, walk through a room and he had a person from a finance company just saying, "Oh, well, we're working with this in this company, but it's not going well. I want to. What's your number? Like connect." So I that level of demand, again, not from a high tech company, but from like a finance company of like, "Hey, we need help on our agentic." Which is how people are thinking about these end to end workflows, these very flexible ways of handling documents and all this stuff. And this buyer was like extremely interested. So I think that's going to be something we saw with mobile. We of course saw it with internet. Trilogy here in Austin. You need to build websites, you need to build apps, and now it's going to be agents. I think is potentially the last piece, the next
Yeah,
piece.
little bit of a tangent, but sort of related. Humans are going to remain in the loop, so to speak. You've talked in the past to me about a model of selling a product, an AI centric product that comes with a certain amount of hours, I think, of human oversight. Talk a little bit more about that model, and do you think it's gonna last here, or is this sort of transitional type of a?
Yeah, nobody wants to adopt the level of disruptive change across their entire business necessary to be successful in AI. It's when I go to people, I'm like, look, we need to do all of this automated, and I talk about it in terms of we need to go fundamentally change the way your business is operating. Not much appetite. If you go and say, hey, let's actually go and find a subset of your company that would benefit from doing AI, hey, this single software development project, or hey, let's monitor this new construction project using agents instead of having your traditional project management teams. The ability to kind of do an end to end, replacing a human, what would normally be a human being's job with an agent, is a fantastic way to overcome that initial doubt about, hey, do we want to make a disruptive change? Is this going to be more disruptive than valuable? And so there's an essay I think by Ethan Mollick called "Cyborgs versus Centaurs." It's like, do you have a human working with an AI, or do you have like this fully integrated human-like object, which is just heavily AI? And that cyborg way of selling versus like trying to say, okay, there's going to be some humans and there will be supplemented by AI. So no, 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 we're going to build a new type of thing that will do almost as much as we can, like RoboCop with machine, but that last little bit we'll do with humans. And you're just trying to fill the existing role that companies are willing to experiment with because
Yeah,
you tell somebody, hey,
that makes a lot of sense, right? Because what you want is a solution, not kind of tools to do something. You're like, yeah, that's great, Matt, that we want to experiment with this stuff, but we need this problem solved, and it makes sense to have a human. I keep saying in the loop because it's more than that. It's kind of oversight and supervision and things like that as well.
yeah, and so like the main thing you want to track there, um, is the AI doing what you expect? How do you tell? And then how do you make sure a human being is escalated when the AI is not working? And that's the human in the loop that everyone has to think about.
Yeah, for what it's worth, we're seeing the same thing. And just like to remind folks, you're probably targeting slightly larger businesses and we're slightly smaller, but we're seeing exactly the same thing. There's this appetite, as you said, yeah, this would be awesome. But then there's the reality of like, oh, we got to change all these things and do that. And you're giving me all this thinking work and I'm just trying to run my business. And so we're kind of doing the human on ramp for them where we're doing the supervision to get them to the point
The
where
good
like,
news
yeah,
is,
this
and
is
like
great.
the whole idea though is like the quality of AI, the more reps you get at a problem, there's a lot of things you can do to kind of find edge cases and resolve them. You know, the fast development cycles of developing with the AI versus, what we used to do, like heavy UI changes and data model changes and machine learning in the background and algorithm changes. Now you just say, hey, don't do that anymore. Like almost you type that in the prompt. And so, catching as many of these cycles as possible, as quickly as possible, is probably going to also produce the economic performers as well. So there might be a way to fully automate it, but why? When you could just keep a human in the loop, resolve some of those edge cases. For us, the number one thing that we're using our human beings for is investigating why we don't have access to data. So we'll say, just kind of at the end, say, hey, we have some ways of detecting how well the users agree with our perception of the data, but then you also just call them up. Hey, how did it go this week? Is this good? No, you missed some stuff. Hey, where is that? Where is the data stored? And like making sure we access those. But again, it's logarithmic in terms of you're going to have a lot of those types of missing elements initially, but then very quickly within each an account, and then as an overall product, you're going to just have this leveling off. That there's still going to be changes, but they're going to become much. You're going to catch the big ones earliest, and so I think that's the cyborg
Yeah.
development scale.
So we like to wrap these things by talking about things we've seen this week that are of interest, and this is kind of a segue from literally what you just said. I don't know if you saw Manus.ai
That
this
was that
week.
was I think the biggest thing in the last few days. Manus is basically someone operating an agent in a very unsafe way. And I only say unsafe. It came from China. It was a Chinese company, real bright young person giving
The president,
the
the demo, yeah.
preview. But I think it was basically just a wrapper on existing LLM technology. But they were using the ability for Anthropic Claude to kind of control your computer,
Yeah,
uh,
computer use.
and then there's some wrappers and tricks. But it's shocking some people about what it can do. But I think this is one of those things where it just shows that we're not constrained by the quality of technology. It's about our ability to feel comfortable adopting it.
Yeah,
Is
it didn't. The strangest thing for me was that it was all that stuff aside and agreed with that is a general agent or a generalized agent, which to me seems crazy on two fronts. First of all, you can never, maybe you can in 20 years' time be a general agent, right? All knowing, all seeing type of a thing. But right now, to present yourself as that and to try and boil the ocean makes not a lot of sense to me. Secondarily, I don't think we're looking for general agents. I just don't. I just don't think you're. That doesn't make sense to me as a CEO or a senior person in a business. You're looking to solve particular problems. Now, if this generalized agent could solve all problems, yes, but that's not like
yeah, look,
it's kind of the App Store versus the App Store model of an agent has to be very lightweight, can do one very small thing, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. I want something that specializes really.
I'm trying to figure like what level to address this because I completely agree. But I think the biggest thing we need to consider is business is a competition. Heraclitus said, "All is strife, and strife is justice." Right? Like we believe that business is best when it's a competition. There's no monopolies. There's no kings. It's democratic. It's competitive. There's constant fighting. Just remember that. Like we would consider any government that doesn't have strife is illegitimate. Any business situation where there's a single winner who can't be challenged, we would call monopoly. We consider that illegitimate. And these idea of a generalized agent, it's like I think what's coming is these agents will start competing with each other and competing with people. That hasn't happened yet. We don't see these agents taking people's jobs. At least that's not the stories I'm hearing. It's, oh, that could do something in the future. But even more, it's like this idea that there's going to be a generalized agent. No, agents will start to have to fight for their lives, and that's going to very quickly change how we think about them. Like, agents are not just going to be able to be released and do stuff. Like the open internet and I think the low security environment we've had for the past 30, 40 years around the internet, you made a couple passwords and stuff, but essentially like assuming that it's very hard for human beings to come in and cause mischief, that's going to go away. And so I think cybersecurity companies are continue to be gigantic winners. I think companies owning data, platforms for coordinating these agents, which is my take on things. That's where I'm investing. But the idea that there's going to be this one agent or this one LLM company that's going to take over the world, it's like, no, that just shows the immaturity of this. Like any mature system is constant fighting. And this idea that you can have an agent just run wild and do whatever it wants, I don't know. It doesn't
I agree.
actually.
I think we might get there in the long run through consolidation, right? Where you'll have some sort of a roll up where like, oh my God, look at the like Pact is the absolute dominating, winner in project management. Let's grab those guys. Let's put them beside the sales AI of that's dominating, roll them up that way. But to try and jump ahead and say you're going to be the best chef.
I'm sure that guy's making a lot of very valuable VC connections this weekend. You got to separate marketing from that. But
Were they at South by Southwest?
Manus, no, I don't think so. I mean, I don't
No,
think. Who knows? South by
no.
Southwest is just like a non-thing. Like you show up at a building. It's a nondescript building. You come in, but it was absolutely jam-packed. I went to the General Catalyst house. Went to some VC events, but it's not like a thing. It's like this kind of mood that comes over Austin, and everybody's here, and you can get free food in a lot of good places. But it's not like a centralized thing. It's not like you can just point and say, "Oh, this is what's happening at South by South." It's very kind of obscure in that way.
All right, all right. Anything else? Any parting thoughts before we wrap up?
Um, I, the continue. Yeah, I used to write this report on video analytics called the Video Index, and it just felt like every report I wrote between 2013 or 2011 and when I left in 2013, 2015, and even the people who kept it on after I left was just, mobile video use is going up, and it was the same story every quarter, and it was the same number. It was because it was exponential. It was just like mobile use went up by 30% this quarter, and then the next quarter I'd write the same thing, and it would get picked up by the press every quarter, so we kept writing it. But I feel we're in a very similar situation. You just have this very big sweeping change that's going to be coming over the next year or two. And we can talk about the particulars, but it's going to get boring. It's going to be like, yeah, agents are still the thing. It feels like that. And again, we've seen this kind of wave come and then crest and fall back. And in 2016, when Mark Zuckerberg said, "Oh, chatbots are going to be a new thing. It's all going to be voice interfaces," I was very excited about that, a new UI. But this feels much more durable, and there's much more money behind it, and the quality of the products is being attested to by our customers, not Mark Zuckerberg on stage at F5. So I think it's going to
Yeah.
be a very interesting period, but it's going to be kind of boring in terms of what's happening. It's like, oh, more agent shit.
All right. Well, I tend to agree. So maybe we'll land the plane there, and we'll see everybody next week.
All right, thanks, Ian.
Cheers, Matt. Bye bye.
Bye.